Are we on?
Have we met before, people? Oh, that's right. I've been up here for the past day and a half. Afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for choosing our session today in the afternoon on Sauce Headless. Hashtag track one rules. Still determined to make that a thing. So we're here to talk about Sauce Headless. Now, I'm really excited. I was sitting here in track one all day yesterday. Headless came up a ton. RentPath, who are here in the front row, JT and Abdur, they gave a great presentation yesterday about how they use Sauce Headless in our beta program. And just generally, there seems to be a lot of excitement. We also recently announced a Sauce Headless solution, recently meaning yesterday. And I know that some of you are probably here in this room because you're wondering, what exactly is Sauce Headless? What's the solution that we announced is generally available just yesterday? And so that's why we're here. What the heck is Sauce Headless? Well, let's tell you more about it. So just a brief, before we do this, just by quick show of hands, how many of you are currently or considering running tests on headless browsers? Just a quick show of hands. Yeah, that makes sense. So Sam did a lot of amazing market research on the benefits of headless testing and how prevalent it's becoming in the market. And her survey showed that 50% of customers that we surveyed have either already implemented a headless solution or are well on their way. And so we want to start this talk by briefly outlining some of those market trends and some things that we've found that have led to the rise of popularity of headless testing. We'll then take it a level deeper and discuss just some best practices and some ideas on how to successfully integrate headless testing as part of a larger continuous testing strategy. And then obviously, while we're all here, we'll wrap up with an introduction of Sauce Headless. What is it? What are the benefits that we've seen both internally and externally with our beta program? My name is Alissa Lydon. Teresa did a great job introducing me, but I am a product marketing manager at Sauce Labs, and I'm a big fan of Austin, even though yesterday when lightning hit the building, I was legitimately scared. I'm born and raised in California. Lightning, not a thing for me. So I'm glad I survived, and I'm happy to be here in front of you.
Sam Coffman. Teresa introduced me as well. Lightning didn't really scare me. I don't know what it is. I'm California born too, but what has been your favorite part about Austin so far?
I mean, the food.
The food. The tacos.
We just got back from Tokyo. We were at Selenium Conf last week, and we literally ate our way through the city.
Oh my gosh, we ate so much sushi.
So much rice.
So coming here was like, okay, let's get into taco mode.
Yeah, now we're in total taco mode. I'm on a detox from now on. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. So everyone here in the room is very much aware that the way that software is being created, developed, has gone through some seismic changes in the past number of years. We've really started to move away from this traditional waterfall methodology, and it's really for a number of reasons. Having one step after the other, teams very siloed and working on separate things at separate times, and most importantly for the people in this room, leaving testing or verification towards the end of that cycle meant that bugs were being found closer to the end of the life cycle. These bugs were complex and difficult to debug and remediate, and so this meant delayed releases, everything being bundled together in large package applications for maybe annual releases. This left development teams feeling less productive, QA teams feeling frustrated that they're chasing down lots of bugs, and just generally, especially in the new digital age, customers just not feeling satisfied with the quality of products that they were getting from companies. And I'm not here to go into what is agile. Obviously, everyone here in this room is probably way more well-versed in agile than I am, but I think the key important things that I want to get across as to why we want to frame this in an agile discussion is that agile really promotes every step instead of being one after the other, everything is interdependent on each other. Those walls are breaking down between, for example, development and QA, development and ops, and now we're seeing a lot more cross-functionality as teams start to work together to build better applications and release things more quickly. And then finally, agile is all about iteration. Everything's being packaged into much more smaller chunks of features and updates, meaning that you're able to release, instead of yearly, think monthly, weekly, on demand with every pull request. And so the reason I frame it this way is because obviously everyone in this room knows that we've been making a huge push, the industry in general, to really think about if you're changing the way you're developing your software, you also have to change the way that you test. Testing earlier and more often proves to be an effective strategy for finding and remediating bugs much more quickly when they're cheaper and easier to fix, and really accelerates code velocity through the pipeline. And so for the first few years of this idea of continuous testing or shifting testing left, testing earlier and more often, this was a consideration for QA teams. It was QA really leading the charge. But after some market research and interviews with customers, as Sam's about to go into, we're finding that this discussion is moving out of that end of the pipeline stage, and it's really starting to affect the way developers are doing their jobs as well.
Yeah, so like Alissa mentioned, we're seeing some market trends more holistically, like what's happening in the market, but we're also seeing some trends in terms of technology and also process changes that are really accelerating this shift left. So like Alissa touched on, DevOps becoming much more popular. Developers are being asked to test a lot more. And this is probably why we're seeing more developers at conferences like these and conferences like Selenium Conf. And we're seeing this sort of lead the trend for frameworks emerging for WebDriver, specifically JS frameworks. Nightwatch.js, WebDriver.io, thank you, Christian. And so this is sort of happening in the open source community itself, but there's other challenges with these process changes. So like React and Angular is another example. We're seeing the future of web where React and Angular components are really leading the way that the applications on the web are being built. And the result of this is more components. And to test components, it's really valuable to run unit tests, but also integration tests. Integration tests will lead to needing to run it on more heavy infrastructure. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. With Chrome and Firefox also being the best first check, and we're sort of seeing that trend in the market as well. Chrome has really taken over as the market leader, as we've seen. Firefox right behind it. And this is sort of leading us to believe, is there a lighter infrastructure for us to use to check just Chrome and Firefox to sort of get that feedback much quicker?
Good, so let's look at this from a pipeline level. So now we're digging in a little bit more and starting to get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty. Hopefully we've made a case by now that, and everyone in this room, it seems, who's raised their hand would agree that testing, organizations that really want to see the benefits, the speed benefits and the quality improvement benefits of continuous testing are moving their tests earlier in the pipeline. And so while at previous events, testing events, we really started, or SauceCons, we've focused on these tests towards the end of the pipeline. Think your end-to-end regressions, your production tests, your user acceptance tests. We're now seeing a lot more conversation around how to address the problems or the challenges that come up when you start scaling out component level testing, sanity checks, UI tests, pull request tests. And that's because these sorts of tests at scale present a whole new host of challenges. The first, and I love that this has been a big focus of this conference so far, is the idea of this cultural shift. Claude Jones keeps getting shout outs for a reason. That's because it usually tends to be the toughest barrier. And in this context, it's that developers aren't used to writing end-to-end tests. They're not used to writing tests in Selenium. Obviously, WebDriver, IO, and other frameworks have helped alleviate this pain. But there still needs to be that buy-in and that collaborative spirit with developers to really lean in and start incorporating testing into their workflows. The next challenge, say that you do have that cultural buy-in, is that now, as you're scaling tests both at the end of the pipeline where it's normally existed earlier, now you have more people hitting shared resources. So think capacity that was once just for QA to run full cross-browser tests and checks. Now developers are hitting that same infrastructure, and it's actually becoming counterproductive. We've had a lot of customers report that as they scale testing, obviously there's going to be throttling. There's going to be queuing up for tests. It leaves people feeling frustrated because it's like, well, wait, I thought this was supposed to make my job easier and make everything move faster. And then related to that is this idea of context switching. Has anyone heard of context switching before? Show of hands. Oh, cool. Yeah, a couple people? Okay. So the fact of the matter is, and I'll give a definition, is that context switching, no one likes it. Developers don't like it. QA doesn't like it. None of us like context switching. And here's a great example. I'm a developer working in an agile sprint. I have a number of tasks that I need to check off my list before we can call the sprint done. And so let's say I come in the morning, I complete a task, and I submit a PR, and the tests start running, a full suite of tests start running. Now, if I don't have the right resources to get the fast feedback, say it takes hours for those tests to come back to me, I'm not gonna sit around and wait for hours. I have a huge long list of stuff I gotta do. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put that to the side, and I'm gonna start another item on my list. And I'm working, and I'm heads down, And let's say hours later I get the report back, hey, guess what? This thing you were working on over here, it doesn't work. You got to go fix it. And so now I'm having to switch between two different tasks, putting one down to pick up another. And the more we do that, it's leaving us feeling less productive. It makes the organization less productive. And again, when you're talking about trying to get that cultural buy-in, it's these sort of things that are going to dissuade people and developers and testers alike from really adopting some of these best practices to help release code more quickly with less bugs.
So we've been talking a lot about how the market's changing, some trends that have really validated this change in the market. And then we're talking about some challenges we start to see when we shift left. So we also know this is a challenge because Sauce Labs had it. So essentially, our teams were doing exactly what Alissa had mentioned, throttling, queuing up. We were sharing resources. And you have to remember that Sauce doesn't have a QA organization. We're developer-driven testing, and all of our devs write their own tests and validate everything themselves. And this is great, but you run into problems when everyone's sharing resources and we can't pass it on to the next person. So we needed a way to essentially test early on in the pipeline, get that feedback quickly, and validate before things got passed off through the integration build later on. So we basically built out a team around this problem. This came to be known as the Kill the Build team. The Kill the Build team essentially built the first iteration of what is now Sauce Headless. And they built out a containerized infrastructure. Thomas Boyles is going to talk about this later on today, I think at around 4. He's going to talk about scaling Sauce using Kubernetes. And this ties right into that. He'll talk about that more in detail. But we were thinking about, okay, how do we get these to spin up much faster? How do we make it more affordable for ourselves to spin up these tests? And then also make the test run a bit faster. And that's how we landed on Headless. So developers were seeing great feedback from this. They were able to run a bunch of headless sessions, run them early on, get their feedback, move on to the next step. And to Alyssa's point, they weren't switching between tasks. They could validate right when they were working on the code. They could see if it passed. If it didn't, then they could go debug without having to move on to other tasks. So it really helped alleviate that pain point. And then again, as we, as Sauce, see our architecture changing, and we're always learning about the best ways to improve our testing process, we also saw that our customers were asking for the same thing. So like Alissa mentioned early on when I was doing my research for this, I was talking to a lot of customers, and one of the things they kept saying to me is, we're doing great with automation, we're shifting left, but we're still not going fast enough. How do we improve our speed? How do we deploy faster? RentPath talked about this yesterday. We're using automation, we're loving it, but how can we get it down to 20 minutes? How can we get the 20 minutes down to 7? Or how can we reach the goal of deploying once or twice a day? So this is really what we saw from our internal struggle, and then we saw it out in the market. So we thought there's a great opportunity here based on the solution that we built. Let's introduce the market to Sauce Headless.
All right, so what is Sauce Headless? Again, Samantha really perfectly outlined this use case, both internally that we experienced and externally from her research. But it all stems from this fact that as early pipeline testing becomes more and more prevalent, developers are going to need access to the right tool for the right problems or the right challenges. They need infrastructure that's lightweight. They need it to be fast so they can get that quick feedback, and it needs to be able to scale. And so Sauce Headless is offering headless Chrome and Firefox on Linux containers on Kubernetes, the 3 previous versions only. And what that allows is just for quick checks, get that quick feedback to developers on component tests and sanity checks to ensure that they can merge their code into master, allowing more stable code to move through the pipeline more quickly. Sauce Headless also does provide some pass-fail data for quick debugging. We're going to get into the differences on what's offered in Sauce Headless and what is not in terms of debugging, but know that there's still that feedback and getting, yes, this works, no, this doesn't. And then finally, because we're hosting this on containers in the cloud, you're able to scale up very quickly. You're able to run in massive parallel at a lower price point. Which really allows for the type of broad adoption that we're seeing across a number of different development teams as the suite grows to include more and more integration tests. I know Richard Bradshaw was up here talking about pyramids and how they're ancient and all these different testing models. There are a lot of great new testing models out there that show how integration is really starting to increase in a lot of testing strategies. Sauce Headless allows to account for that increase at the testing at this level. so that way you can still ensure that your app, that everything works flawlessly without having to slow down that pipeline velocity.
Okay, so just to level set, and I'm really sorry if this is repetitive. If you guys know what a headless browser is, you can just text or something. So what is a headless browser? So really the point of this slide is to explain the differences between cross-browser and headless, and in terms of technical, technical drawbacks, and what cross-browser can offer and what Sauce can offer through cross-browser versus what headless can offer. And it's simply just, a technical drawback. We're not just not giving it to you. So if you go to the next one, so what is a headed browser, a cross-browser VM? So in a cross-browser world, we spin up a virtual machine in a data center. You can do it in the cloud. And because you can do that, because you have an operating system, you're able to run a GUI. And on the GUI, you're running a browser. And this is really important because we're able to capture video from this. And this is something that we can't offer in headless, because headless is just a browser running in a containerized infrastructure in the cloud. And because it's just the UI, we're able to grab screenshots, but without the GUI, we can't record video. So we're not keeping the video from you, I promise, but screenshot validation is what you get in terms of debugging for this reason. Additionally, things like performance and just testing on Internet Explorer, Safari, or across different operating systems. This is something you need to validate on cross-browser. Again, we want to continue to drive the point home that headless is really great for early pipeline testing. It's not meant to replace, and again, RentPath really clearly outlined this, that it's not meant to replace what you're doing later on in the pipeline, but meant to get that quick feedback early on, so you don't see these bugs later on and have to bring in your developers at a later point in time when they're already working on something else.
So what does this mean in terms of this pipeline that I threw up a couple slides ago? So now that red box has gone around post-commit, and that's just because we've solved for this issue in a much more effective way by introducing Sauce Headless into our product offering. As Sam mentioned, you still need the full cross-browser functionality for the traditional place that it's existed always in your pipeline. You need access to all the browsers, all the operating systems, real physical mobile devices. Again, Richard Bradshaw put it perfectly yesterday. No one's navigating to your site on a headless browser on Linux, right?
We're not suggesting you do that.
Yeah. So you still need those real-world conditions later in the pipeline to ensure that everything works as expected. You'll also need access to video recordings, not just for late in the pipeline, but even at these early pipeline checks. If there's an issue and we can't find it in the screenshots or in the logs, we need to be able to run that same test to record the video. You also need extended debugging in certain cases, which Sauce Headless does not have. That's on our cross-browser offering. But really, it's all about plugging in the right infrastructure tool for the right job. And so Sauce Headless helps to kind of complete your continuous testing pipeline so that you're able to keep code moving through your life cycle quickly so you can release more frequently.
Okay, so now, how do you integrate into your testing strategy? So I look at this from two levels. So Alissa just put up the pipeline, which is great for looking at it from a holistic point of view. So I'm going to talk about, where in the pipeline, from a macro level, does it make sense to plug headless in? And I want to remind everyone that there's no concept of like headless tests versus cross-browser tests. A test is a test. If you want to run it, you run it in headless and you run it in cross-browser. It's at different points in time. We talk about this event-based testing, and this really is around that concept where on every PR, for example, or nightly regression, there's different infrastructure options for that different type of event, and that's really what headless is good for, is the early pipeline testing, the every PR type sanity check. So yeah, to that point, where in the pipeline, on every PR in a shared dev environment. Before, it was really expensive to run on every PR, as you guys know, using VMs or using the traditional cloud offering that's out there today. And now you have an ability to run all your tests in parallel using headless, and because it's more lightweight, you can get that feedback much faster and you can fully parallelize. As a sanity check, I'm going to do a demo on this later in the demo theater, but I'm going to demo this exact thing. I just want to see if I broke anything. Like, holy crap, I just built this. Let me see if I broke anything in the shared delivery pipeline. I want to make sure I don't break anything for anybody else. It's just instilling confidence for the developer, for whoever's working on that piece of code, that you're not going to break something for someone later on. And then just, this is what we've been saying a lot. We've been talking a lot about shift left, but this is what we truly believe is the scalable infrastructure for the whole shift left movement. And then taking it down on a level, so sort of the micro level view, which tests, so what type of tests? And again, I said this, there's no concept of headless versus cross-browser, but similar to what RentPath was talking about, they had to dig through their code base a little bit, and they had to fix some things to really optimize for headless. And what this means is you want to make sure your tests are atomic, meaning they test one functionality and one functionality only. They're not dependent on other parts of the app. Short, so they're not, there's not a bunch of implicit waits. They're not waiting around for an element to appear. You want it to be able to run fast and give you that feedback really quickly as well. Parallelize well and quick feedback. Really what I'm trying to get at here is this is not a starting point. If you haven't really gotten into the groove of automation, learned how to parallelize, we don't truly recommend starting with headless. Get comfortable with the cross-browser offering, get comfortable with automation first, and then once you've really nailed parallelization, headless is really right for you because you can parallelize so well on it. And then I'm a huge fan of this concept of integration tests. I don't know, has anyone seen Kent Dobbs, his trophy pyramid concept? It's about end-to-end at the top, a bunch of integration tests, then some unit tests. Anyone? No? Cool. So I'm a huge fan of this because I think we're really moving in the direction, especially with Angular and React, that integration tests are going to really be the best first check and the best way to validate functionality early on. End-to-end will still have its place, but we're going to see more and more a large number of integration tests coming into play with our pipelines. So headless we really see as a solution here.
All right, so what are some of the benefits? Hopefully we've started outlining them, so this doesn't seem too shocking, but we think there are 4 key areas, at least initially in the GA, where we see major benefits to using Sauce Labs. You always have benefit using Sauce Labs. Sauce Headless. The first is the most obvious, increasing that build efficiency. Developers want that fast feedback. In order to incorporate more testing, you have to be able to run these sorts of tests quickly in order to keep efficiency high, so there's no context switching. They get that quick feedback. I didn't mess anything up. Boom, on to the next. Moving to the right, the single unified testing experience. Again, I think we've made it clear we don't recommend replacing cross-browser with headless. We think it's a certain tool for a certain type of challenge. And what's great is that it's easy to be able to switch in between the two. You can run all of your existing Selenium tests through headless on both platforms. And really, it's the ability to have access to that rich debugging, those videos, that extended debugging, the full comprehensive coverage. Developers are still going to want access to that type of infrastructure. And it's the best of both worlds, truly, for every point in the pipeline. Building on the unified platform on the bottom left is security. As I mentioned, Sauce Headless doesn't have the same functionality as cross-browser. But we do understand that a lot of you here in the audience, especially those in financial services, healthcare, et cetera, are very security conscious, and Sauce Connect is a major component of our platform that you've come to trust. And so that's why we prioritized Sauce Connect support at GA. So you'll be able to build a tunnel to the Sauce Headless environment, just as you would be able to in cross-browser, so you have that same secure experience. And then finally, in the bottom right is that same value that hopefully you've all come to know and appreciate when using a cloud-based infrastructure to run all of your tests through. And that's just, you're saving yourselves time, money, grief, without having to set up, maintain, and update an infrastructure on your own. You're really able to increase testing coverage, keep costs low, and then keep your sanity, because let's be honest, managing a grid is no fun. For those who don't know, we ran a very successful beta program starting back in the fall of last year. I see a couple beta customers already in here. Obviously, again, shout out to RentPath for giving such a great talk yesterday. But I want to highlight a couple others. I see growth acceleration partners right here in the third row. Yes, woot woot. They were able to reduce their UI regression runs from 5 hours to 30 minutes running their early pipeline tests through Sauce Headless. And they're very much aware that these short feedback cycles are really critical to helping optimize their continuous delivery pipeline, and they're catching these bugs earlier than they were before they started using Sauce Headless. InStructure was another great beta customer. I think Tucker's somewhere in here. I was talking with him at the party last night. They were using Headless to reduce the runtime of just a subset of their tests from 30 minutes to 5 minutes, so again, that speed benefit. And I like this idea, it's a subset of their tests. Again, there's no such thing as a headless test versus a cross-browser test. A test is a test. But really it's all about finding which of those checks or which of those tests are gonna fit best earlier in the pipeline to get that fast feedback and using the right infrastructure to get that. Personal Capital tried out a suite of 6 tests that ran in less than 200 milliseconds. I mean, in some cases, it's running so fast that if you execute the tests and then go over to the dashboard, the speedometer doesn't even go up because it executes that quickly in certain cases. It's great to hear that it's magical.
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 A testing tool is magical.
This last one's even better. I saved this one for last because it's my favorite. No data on this one, but CBT Nuggets is super stoked that Sauce Headless is running this fast. And I think this is the first time I can say that I've heard someone say that they're super stoked about testing. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so just to wrap it up, we've shown you this pipeline. I think this is the 3rd time now. But really what I want to talk about here is with the acquisition of Screener and with the announcement of performance testing, we really are trying to fill all the gaps in the pipeline and offer a complete continuous testing solution. And with that, you get the full Sauce experience. So our debugging capabilities, our reliability, our secure Sauce Connect tunnels that we offer, and just the experience and expertise that we offer, with our CSMs and our solutions architects that come in and solve specific problems related to your organization. Yeah, I mean, this is the real deal. This is the one-stop shop. So we're excited about Headless. We're, if you want to go to the next one, I'm doing a demo of Sauce Headless in action. So if you guys were hoping to come here and see it running, you have to stop by the demo theater at 3. Craft beer is during that time, so grab a beer and then come see the demo.
Bring us a beer too, that would be really great.
Yeah, do that. And it's available now. So as you know, we announced it yesterday. It's generally available for everyone. Contact your account manager to get started. There's some beta customers in the audience. If you want to hear more about their experience, you can go talk to them. 3rd row, 1st row, sorry, putting you guys on the spotlight. Or come talk to us. We love talking about this. This has been such an exciting product to work on. And yeah, these are our Twitters and our emails. Feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Sam just joined Twitter last week.
Oh, yeah.
So she needs followers.
Oh, yeah.
So why don't you help her out and give her a follow?
I have like 60 now in like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Pretty impressed with that. Thank you.
That's it for us, yeah. We were so efficient. We have like 5 minutes for questions.
Yeah.
So ask away, everyone. What do you want to know about Sauce Headless?
Come on. There we go.
We got one.
So as far as like concurrent instances, would the Headless just use the same number of like concurrent instances or licenses that you would normally have for browser testing?
Yeah, good question. So it's essentially you would sign like a new contract or do a new contract, and you can choose however many sessions you want. So the pricing and the way that we've contracted it is the same as like our cross-browser offering. So it's not an add-on, but it's like a new contract that you create, and you can do as many sessions as you like. You're not tied to however many VM sessions you have, if that makes sense. So you can choose however many you want to use, and it's reserve pricing. So it's the same type of pricing model that we have today. Do you want to add anything?
No, that's right, yeah. You would purchase capacity just as you would VMs.
Yeah, it's unlimited minutes.
So I'm definitely pretty impressed by the data about like kind of how much time is being saved for these test runs, and I'm kind of curious, like, do you have any information about like kind of like how much of that is from faster VM launch time versus the tests themselves being faster versus maybe they've reduced the setup tests or more better parallelization? Like is there any like do you have any breakdown about kind of where the performance improvement come from?
Yeah. So I want to call out first, there's a lot of things, when we talk about speed, there's a lot of things that contribute to that, right? So the first is, where are you running your tests from? Where's your application hosted? And where are you hitting, the third party if you're using a cloud vendor? I think all of those locations matter. And second, if you're spinning up a Sauce Connect tunnel, that's going to add a little bit of latency as well. Luckily, our Sauce Connect tunnel for Headless is running in the same cloud on the East Coast that Headless is. So there's minimum latency for that. And then the third is, like you said, test execution. So how much faster is the test actually running in the headless browser versus a headed browser? And then there's a fourth one, actually. It's spin-up time. So spin-up time, we're seeing 2 seconds, so it's the same as our VM offering. We pre-boot our VM, so they're very fast. And our headless, it's about 2 seconds. It's about the same. Test execution, we're seeing about 10% faster in the actual headless browser themselves. When you're doing apples to apples and everything else is the same, just in terms of how the test is running through. Again, this is all dependent on what's in your actual test, right? So you have implicit weights, it's not going to be as fast. If you have things that are dependent on the last step or it's not parallelized, it's gonna affect it. And then additionally, there's less latency we've seen between Sauce Connect and the actual Sauce Headless cluster that we have. Because it's hosted right next to it. If you're on the East Coast and you've traditionally used our VM offering, I would highly recommend just trying out Headless as well because it's hosted in the East Coast right now. And then there was one other thing I wanted to say. Speed, spin-up time, test execution, latency, parallelization. So because it's more affordable, and again, talk to your account manager about pricing, but because it's more affordable, you can parallelize more, right? So for one VM, you can spin up X amount of headless and be able to parallelize for that. Additionally, because you're not as concerned about all the cross-browser at that early on and you're validating against Chrome and Firefox, you can utilize every session that you have just running tests. So if I have 6 tests, I'm going to run all 6 at the same exact time, running against the latest Chrome, for example. Whereas if I was in the production environment, I would be running all 6 tests, but they would probably be going one by one because one test is going to run on Safari, and then on IE, and then on Windows, and it's going to be doing all the operating system cross-browser, and so that's why your resources are a bit more expensive there. Here, you can just fully parallelize all the tests. Does that make sense? It's sort of a complex question.
Yeah. All right, I think we have time for one more. Over to to your right. Kimberly's doing a great job as mic runner, by the way. If you haven't met her yet, she's really awesome. Thank you, Kimberly.
If the application have any pop-ups, like print preview pop-ups and all, those tests also can be executed in the headless?
The which pop-up? Sorry.
Like any kind of pop-up, like alerts or print preview, like Chrome as a preview pop-ups and all, right?
Yeah, we haven't seen issues with that. Again, one of the issues that we saw with Headless, one of the limitations, and RentPath brought this up, was the maps. But we haven't seen any specific issues related to pop-ups. I don't know if the beta customers have experienced that, but we've seen it be very reliable and very similar to what we've seen in a headed Chrome browser. Chromium maintains their headless solution really, really well. Mozilla, we've seen a little bit less, and that's just, again, very dependent on the third-party browser vendors because they're maintaining the headless implementation of the browsers. All right, well, thanks again, everyone. Remember, #track1rules.